The first thing I should say is that Colorado has always had a way of feeling too big for me. When I first moved here with my brother Jason, I thought I'd eventually get used to the scale of the mountains. The endless ridges, the deep cuts of canyons, the forests that seem to roll on without end. But I never really did. Every time I drove into the foothills, there was this strange mix of awe and unease that sat in my chest, like I was entering a place where human presence was a temporary mistake. Jason didn't feel that way at all. He loved it. The bigger the mountains, the more excited he got. And when we found a cheap townhome just outside of Denver, split in the rent so we could both live close to the mountains, it felt like a compromise I could live with. Close enough for him to indulge his need for trails and campsites, close enough for me to still retreat into civilization whenever the silence started pressing too hard. But this trip, this 3-day backpacking trip into a lesser-known stretch of wilderness, that was his idea. He sold it to me with one line: "You're always saying you want peace and quiet. Let's go somewhere people don't bother with. Just you, me, and the mountains." I should have been more skeptical. Peace and quiet in the mountains often meant distance from safety too. The morning we left was bright and cool, the kind of day where the sun felt warm but the wind still carried a bite. We drove south for 2 hours before pulling into a gravel lot that doubled as the trailhead. Only one other car sat there, a dusty, beat-up SUV with the mud splashed up the sides and a windshield that looked like it hadn't seen a wiper in months. Jason looked at it, then at me, grinning. "Looks like just one other hiker. We'll practically have the place to ourselves." I didn't share his enthusiasm. Something about that SUV unsettled me. It wasn't just dirty. It looked abandoned, like it had been sitting there longer than anyone would reasonably leave a car in a place like this. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to start the trip with me being the paranoid one again. We shouldered our packs, tightened straps, and started walking. The first miles were easy. The trail was wide, padded with pine needles, flanked by aspens that creaked in the breeze. The air smelled sharp, full of resin and earth. Jason led the way, his pace quick and light, as though 8 miles meant nothing to him. I kept up, though the pack cut into my shoulders and the incline started biting into my legs when the ground began to rise. By the time we reached the final stretch, steeper, rockier, with switchbacks carved into the mountainside, I was sweating through my shirt. Jason, of course, looked like he was on a casual stroll. "Come on," he called back. "Wait till you see the spot I picked." Totally worth it. I wanted to curse him for his energy. But when we finally reached the small flat shelf of land about 3/4 of the way up, and I saw the view, it shut me up. The whole valley opened beneath us. Layers of ridges folded one over the other, each one darker blue as it stretched toward the horizon. The sky was beginning to glow orange with the lowering sun, and clouds caught fire at their edges. For a moment, I forgot my aching legs. Jason smirked. "Told you." We pitched our tents close to the cliff edge, but with enough room for safety. After gathering branches and stones for a makeshift fire ring, Jason sparked it to life. We sat around it as night pulled down over the mountains, talking about nothing and everything. Old memories, work frustrations, half-series plans for the future. The fire crackled, sparks snapped into the dark. For a while, I forgot we were miles from anyone. perched on a mountainside far above the nearest light. Then, without warning, footsteps, both of us froze. It wasn't an animal, not the scatter of paws or the snap of branches. These were measured, heavy, human. We turned toward the sound, toward the trail that led up from the switchbacks. A moment later, a man emerged into the ring of firelight. The first thing I noticed was his face. Not his clothes, not his build. His face, specifically the grin stretched across it. He wasn't wearing a headlamp, which struck me as bizarre. Every hiker, every camper, knows that once darkness falls in the backcountry, you carry light. Without it, one wrong step could send you tumbling into a ravine. But this man walked up as though he'd been waiting for our fire to guide him. "Hey," Jason called, standing, his tone cautious but polite. "Did you need something?" The man stopped at the edge of the firelight. His grin didn't move. "I'm a ranger," he said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "This section is closed." "You're not supposed to be here." Jason glanced at me. We had permits in our packs. We'd confirmed this route was open, and no ranger would hike alone, without light, without gear, this deep into the mountains at night. But the man didn't falter. His grin stayed locked, as though it was pasted there. "You both need to pack up. Come with me now. I'll lead you back to the trailhead." Something in his tone made the hair on my arms rise. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, like a teacher telling a child to follow instructions, like he expected us to obey without question. Jason's jaw tightened. "We're staying here." The man's eyes flicked to him, then to me. He didn't frown, didn't argue, just turned slowly and walked back into the dark. We didn't speak for a long time after he left. The silence around us seemed thicker, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I kept staring at the trail, waiting to see that grin reappear in the firelight. Eventually, Jason tossed more wood into the flames. "We'll keep it going all night," he muttered. And we did. Neither of us slept. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of wind through the trees made us flinch. Twice I thought I heard footsteps again, faint and dragging, but nothing came into view. The fire dwindled toward dawn, and with the first gray light of morning, we packed in silence. The hike down was brutal on little sleep. My legs felt like lead, my eyes dry and gritty. But every time I glanced back up the trail, I expected to see that man following, keeping his distance. When we reached the lot, the SUV was still there. Dusty, dead-looking, Jason stopped staring at it. "Do you think—" I didn't want to finish the thought. That maybe the man belonged to this car. That maybe he wasn't just wandering the trails, but had been waiting out here, alone, for people like us. We drove home in silence. We called the local authorities, reported the encounter. They were polite but dismissive. No rangers were supposed to be in that section, they confirmed. But without proof, without names, what could they do? I kept thinking about what he wanted. Why he tried to get us to follow him down into the woods in the middle of the night. The possibilities clawed at me. And that SUV. If he wasn't the owner, then where was the real hiker who parked it there? We never found out, but I haven't camped with Jason since, and every time I think about the grin stretched across that stranger's face, I know one thing for certain. He wasn't a ranger, and if we'd followed him into the dark, we wouldn't have come back. Two lines hook. Sometimes the most peaceful places hide the darkest secrets, and sometimes silence is far more terrifying than screams. The first time I laid eyes on that lake, it looked like a painting. The water was still, so perfectly reflective, it seemed like a second sky had been poured onto the earth. The surrounding forest hugged it tightly, trees leaning forward like they wanted to peek into their own reflections. It should have been beautiful. It should have felt safe. But even then, something felt wrong. I couldn't place it at first. Maybe it was the way the birds refused to land near the shore, or how the wind seemed to die the moment it touched the water. But there was a weight in the air, a hush that pressed against my ears, like someone holding their hands over them. My friends did notice. They never noticed things like that. We had been hiking all morning, me, Josh, and Clara, following a barely visible trail that twisted through the woods. The plan was to camp by the lake for the night, roast marshmallows, tell dumb stories, and sleep under the stars. Josh had seen the place mentioned in some old hiker's guide, a forgotten spot that wasn't on modern maps anymore. Hidden gem, he called it. I should have known better. Hidden gems are usually hidden for a reason. We set up camp at the water's edge. Josh, always the practical one, focused on pitching the tent and gathering firewood. Clara wandered off with her camera, snapping pictures of the shoreline, fascinated by how still the water was. And me? I just stood there for a long time, staring at that silent lake. My stomach knotted, because even though the water looked calm, it didn't feel calm. That night, the silence deepened. Most lakes are alive at night. Frogs croak, crickets sing, fish leap and splash, but here, nothing. The woods around us were so still, it felt unnatural, like every creature had fled. Even our fire seemed too loud, the crackling and popping echoing across the glassy surface of the water. "Creepy, isn't it?" Clara whispered, hugging her knees. Josh laughed. "It's peaceful. You two watch too many horror movies." But even as he spoke, I caught him glancing at the lake, his smile a little too forced. We tried to laugh it off, to pretend it was just nerves, told silly stories around the fire, roasted marshmallows, drank a little from the flask Josh had smuggled in. But as the flames died down and the stars wheeled overhead, the silence pressed heavier and heavier. And then, just when I thought maybe I was imagining it, I heard something. Splash, not a big one, not like a fish jumping, just a small, careful ripple, as if someone had dipped their hand into the water. We froze. Josh grabbed a flashlight and aimed it at the lake. The beam lit up the surface, but it was just as still as before. No ripples, no sign of movement. The water reflected our fire like a black mirror. "You saw that, right?" Clara whispered. Josh shook his head. "Probably just, I don't know, branch falling in." "Calm down." But there were no trees hanging over the water, no branches, and the look in Josh's eyes told me he didn't believe his own words. We tried to sleep. I lay in the tent, staring at the nylon roof, listening to the heavy silence. Josh was already snoring softly, but Clara tossed and turned. Then I heard it again. Splash. Closer this time. Clara whispered, "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, the sound came again, not water this time, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps, just outside the tent. My chest went tight. Every muscle in my body locked. The footsteps circled as soft crunches on the damp earth. They stopped by the lake. And then, another splash. I held my breath after a long time. Clara whispered, "Someone's out there." But when I dared to unzip the tent and peek out, there was nothing. The fire was dead, just glowing embers. The lake sat in its eerie silence, reflecting the moon. No footprints, no ripples, nothing. Except, I swear, for a second, I saw something move beneath the surface. A pale face staring up at me from under the water. I blinked and it was gone. The next morning, Josh was gone. At first I thought he'd gone to gather wood or wash up, but his boots were still by the tent. His backpack too. It wasn't until I saw the wet footprints leading from the tent to the shore that my stomach dropped. "Josh?" I called, my voice too loud in the silence. No answer. Clara ran to the water's edge, scanning the lake. He wouldn't. Her voice broke. The footprints ended at the shoreline, but there were no footprints coming back. The water was perfectly still. We searched all day, circled the lake, shouted his name until our throats went raw. Nothing. Not a single sign of him. It was like he had just stepped into the water and vanished. By evening, Clara was shaking. "We have to go. We can't stay here." She was right. But when we tried to follow the trail back out of the woods, it wasn't there. I don't mean we lost it, I mean it was gone. The trees had shifted somehow. The ground too smooth, too untouched. Every direction looked the same. No broken branches, no footprints. Just an endless forest that led us back to the same place, over and over again. The lake. Always the lake. That night we didn't sleep. We huddled by the coal ashes of the fire, clutching each other, waiting for dawn. And then, just as the sky began to lighten, I heard him. Josh's voice, calling my name. It came from the lake. I staggered to the shore, heart hammering. And there he was, standing in the water up to his chest, smiling at me. But something was wrong. His smile was too wide, his skin too pale, his eyes empty. "Come in," he said softly. His voice was calm, hypnotic. "The water's perfect." Behind me, Clara screamed, "Don't!" She grabbed my arm, pulling me back. Joshua tilted his head, still smiling. "Why are you fighting it? It's easier this way. Just let go." The surface of the lake rippled, and in that moment, I realized there were more faces beneath the water. Dozens, hundreds, pale, watching, waiting. I tore myself free, stumbling back into the woods. Clara and I ran until our legs gave out. But no matter how far we went, the lake was always there. We never found the way out. I don't know how long we've been here now. Days, weeks, time doesn't feel real anymore. Clara stopped talking after a while. She just sits by the water's edge, staring at her reflection. Sometimes I hear Josh's voice calling me closer. Sometimes I see Clara's lips move, whispering back. And sometimes, late at night, I catch my own reflection in the lake, smiling back at me. So if you ever find yourself hiking deep in the woods and you come across a lake so silent it feels like the world is holding its breath, don't stop. Don't go near it. And whatever you do, don't look too long into the water, because it's looking back at you. When my dad died, everything about life felt like a puzzle dumped on the floor. No edges, no corners, just a mess of jagged pieces that didn't want to fit together. He had been my anchor in some ways, even though he wasn't perfect. A man of silence, of sharp wisdom, given in half sentences. When I was a kid and spooked by shadows in my room, he never told me ghosts weren't real. Instead, he'd sit on the edge of my bed and say, "Don't be afraid of the dead, son. Be afraid of the living. They're the ones who can hurt you." When he took his own life, I was 18, too young to process it, too old to pretend it hadn't happened. Along with grief came something else. An inheritance, a car, some money, and keys to the family cabin tucked into the snowy arms of Oregon near Mount Bachelor. Mom couldn't keep the place. Too many payments, too many memories. It was going on the market in a few weeks. But in that short space of time, it sat vacant, waiting. And in a moment of restless impulse, I decided to go. I quit my job on a Thursday, packed my snowboarding gear, a stack of DVDs, cigarettes, and enough booze and snacks to last weeks. Midnight, my black lab jumped into the passenger seat as though he knew this was the adventure of his lifetime. The drive was a blur of gray skies and mountains. When we pulled up, the cabin looked exactly as I remembered it. 2 stories, sloped roof heavy with snow, balcony stretching from the master bedroom. Cozy but isolated. Only 2 other cabins were anywhere nearby, each a block away, and both sat dark and empty. Beyond that, the forest swallowed everything. I unlocked the door, punched in the alarm code, and stepped into silence. The first 2 days were ordinary. I played in the snow with Midnight, shredded down the slopes until my legs ached, then spent nights sprawled on the couch with PlayStation, music, and whiskey. The world outside could burn for all I cared. For the first time in months, I started to feel light. On the 3rd day, the snow fell heavier, the kind of storm where sky and ground blur into a single sheet of white. I stayed in, content with my own little kingdom. Around noon, I stepped outside with Midnight. That's when I noticed them. Footprints, they wrapped around the cabin, pressed deep and fresh into the snow. Too fresh. The flakes were already covering them, softening their edges, but not enough. Whoever had made them had been there, maybe half an hour earlier. They trailed toward the dense trees, vanishing into darkness. I froze, my breath steaming. This wasn't a tourist area, not in this weather. And I knew for a fact, those 2 other cabins nearby were empty. I told myself it was nothing. Another hiker maybe, some shut-in like me. But unease had already taken root. That night I climbed into bed with Midnight curled against my legs. I was almost asleep when his ears twitched. He sat up stiff and then leapt off the mattress, tearing down the stairs. I held my breath, listening to his nails scrape against the hardwood below. His movements frantic. 5 minutes passed before he came back, pacing, whining, doing his little dance. That meant he needed to go outside. I groaned but grabbed his leash. We went to the driveway, only he didn't pee. He pulled, hard, toward the tree line. His nose low, snout twitching. He circled the side of the house, then looked up, toward the roof. Midnight, I hissed. No. He sat finally, staring into the forest, not moving, just watching. The silence pressed down. Snow fell around us like ash. I dragged him back inside. Half an hour later, I heard it. Thump, thump, something walked across the roof. Not scampering, not scratching, walking. The steps were too far apart, too heavy, too deliberate to be a raccoon or even a person. Midnight's head shot up. He ran to the balcony door, tail stiff, growling low in his throat. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside with a cigarette, trying to convince myself I wasn't afraid. The roof was blanketed in untouched snow. But when I lifted my eyes, that's when I saw it. 20 feet away, in the black skeleton of a pine tree, taller than the cabin, something crouched. At first, my brain tried to make it human. A man squatting on a branch, arms stretched above to grip another branch. But no man was that tall, that thin. Its limbs were elongated, pale against the bark. Its body hunched at impossible angles. And its face, Its face was a void with a mouth gaping open, expressionless, as though it had been carved there. I froze. Midnight barked behind me, the sound sharp and desperate. The thing didn't move. Every instinct screamed at me not to shine the flashlight. Don't draw its attention. Don't break whatever thin boundary existed between us. So I backed away. Step by trembling step, slipped inside, and locked the door. When I finally flicked the beam of light back toward the tree, it was gone. Later that night came the tapping. Soft at first, then steady, a finger against glass. The balcony screen door shuddered with each tap, tap, tap. For an hour, maybe longer, it never stopped. Midnight stared, but wouldn't approach. He whimpered and pressed against me like he wanted to crawl under my skin. And inside my head, beneath the noise, I heard something else. A whisper, a beckoning, like the memory of my father's voice, but twisted. Open the door. My chest tightened, my hands itched to slide the lock. But then my father's real words came back, sharp as glass. Fear the living. I stayed where I was, clenched my fists until nails dug into skin, waited until exhaustion drowned me. When dawn cracked the horizon, pale light spilling across the snow, I didn't hesitate. I packed fast, shoving everything into the car. Midnight jumped in before I even called. As we drove down the winding road, the cabin shrinking in the mirror, I swore I saw movement in the trees. Something tall, something pale, but I didn't stop. Didn't look twice. I just drove until the forest gave way to towns, to traffic, to people. I never went back to that cabin. It sold a few months later. Midnight's gone now too. Sometimes I wonder if he understood more than I did that night. If animals see the world's cracks more clearly than we ever can. All I know is this. There are things in the woods that don't want to be seen. And sometimes they don't give you a choice.